All right, let's dive right in. When the economy starts to tank, you hear this one question everywhere. Should the government spend its way out of the crisis? I mean, this is a debate that involves trillions of dollars, and it affects every single one of us. So today, we're going to break down the single most important number that's right at the heart of that entire argument.
So let's set the stage. Here it is. This is the big one, the billion-dollar question, or maybe more like the trillion-dollar question these days. And on the surface, it seems pretty simple, right? But the answer? Oh man, it splits economists right down the middle, it fuels these huge political battles, and really, it all comes down to your fundamental view of how an economy even works. Okay, so to really get this divide, you can think of it in two basic ways. On one side, you've got the camp that sees the economy as this robust machine that basically fixes itself. For them, government meddling just gets in the way. But then you have the other camp, and they see the economy as something that can get stuck, kind of like a car stuck in the mud. And they argue that sometimes it just needs a big push from the government to get moving again.
So how do economists even try to measure the actual impact of that government push? Well, they use this one single, really powerful concept. Some people even call it the economy's magic number. And that number is called the fiscal multiplier. Don't let the name intimidate you. It's just a ratio. All it does is tell us how much the total economic output, the national income, changes for every single dollar the government either spends or cuts from our taxes.
The best way to think about it is like this. Imagine government spending is a stone you toss into a pond. That first splash, that's the direct spending. Let's say money to build a new bridge. But the real impact, the thing we're interested in, is the ripples. The construction worker gets paid, she goes and buys groceries. The grocer then uses that money to pay their supplier, and so on and so on. The multiplier is just a way of measuring how big those ripples get.
Okay, so you might see a number pop up like this one. So what does a multiplier of 1.5 times actually mean in the real world?
It's pretty simple, actually. It means that for every single dollar the government puts into the economy grows by $1.50. That first dollar just keeps getting passed from person to person, creating more and more value along the way. Now, what if the number is less than 1? Well, that suggests the government spending is actually just displacing or crowding out private spending that was going to happen anyway. And that makes the whole stimulus thing a lot less effective.
Now, for decades, this huge debate just raged on and on about what the true multiplier number was. Everyone had a different answer. But then, there was a breakthrough. Economists started to realize, wait a minute, what if it's not a fixed number at all? What if the multiplier actually changes depending on how healthy the economy is?
And this is where it gets really, really interesting. So have a look. This is what the data says happens in normal economic times. A massive analysis, we're talking nearly 100 different studies, found that the average multiplier is actually less than 1. It's around 0.75. So what does that mean? It means trying to stimulate an economy that's already doing okay is kind of like pushing on a string. It just doesn't do much.
But here's the crucial question, right? Does that same logic hold up when the economy is in a deep, serious downturn?
Well, look what happens. During a recession? Wow. The very same research found something pretty remarkable. The multiplier jumps way up to almost 1.4. All of a sudden, that same government dollar becomes this powerful engine for growth. The big takeaway here is so clear. Context is absolutely everything.
And the story gets even more nuanced. When you dig into the research, it shows that direct government spending consistently gives you a bigger bang for your buck than tax cuts. Just look at the numbers. The multiplier for tax cuts barely even moves between normal times in a recession. It just stays stuck, way below 1. But that spending multiplier, it surges right when the economy needs it the most. Okay, so this whole theory was put to the ultimate stress test back during the 2008 global financial crisis. I mean, that's a moment I think a lot of us remember all too well. And in response, the US government basically threw the kitchen sink at the problem. As you can see here, it started with tax cuts in 2008. Then came that huge stimulus package in 2009, the one called ARA. And they even had programs like Cash for Clunkers. It was a massive, real-world experiment in fiscal policy, happening in real time. But here's the thing. The results were, well, they were far from clear at the time. The recovery felt incredibly slow, and as economist Alan Auerbach points out in this quote, that led to some real skepticism. People started to get really worried about the rising national debt. They were questioning whether the stimulus was even working at all. And all that just led to a loss of appetite for more government spending. And that brings us to the final, absolutely critical piece of this whole puzzle. Because it turns out the very debt that was making everyone so uneasy might actually change the math of the multiplier itself.
So, based on everything we've seen so far, the answer seems pretty obvious, doesn't it? A recession hits, the government should spend, and spend big. Case closed. Right? Well, it's not quite that simple. There's one more catch, a final twist in the story, and it's that the effectiveness of all that spending might depend on how much debt a country is already carrying before the crisis even begins. And, well, this slide shows the stunning conclusion from the research. Just look at these numbers. In a recession, a country with low debt gets a pretty decent bang for its buck. But a country that's already deep in debt, whoa, the multiplier plummets to basically zero. It's like the stimulus money just vanishes into the debt, with almost no ripple effect at all. High debt, it seems, is the kryptonite for fiscal stimulus.
So, let's wrap this up. What have we learned here? First, the fiscal multiplier isn't some fixed magic number. It totally changes with the economic weather. Second, it's way more powerful during a storm, during a recession, especially when it comes to government spending. But, and this is the huge but, if a country is already weighed down by a ton of debt, that powerful tool might just fizzle out. It really proves that in economics, just like in life, context is absolutely everything.
And that leaves us right back where we started, with the billion-dollar question that policymakers are still grappling with every single day. How do you balance the immediate need to fight a fire with a blast of fiscal stimulus against the long-term risk that the debt you're racking up might leave you without a fire hose for the next crisis? That is the incredibly difficult tightrope that governments everywhere are walking.